The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Independence, Missouri, causing Penelope Sinclair to clutch her worn leather journal tighter to her chest as she ducked into the nearest alleyway. The year was 1873, and the frontier town was as wild as the untamed lands that surrounded it. She had come west with dreams of documenting the true spirit of frontier life, not to cower in shadows while men settled their disputes with bullets. Penelope peered around the corner, her heart still racing. The altercation seemed to be over, two men dragging away a third whose boots left trails in the dirt. Her father's warnings about the dangers of her journey rang in her ears, but she squared her shoulders. She wasn't going back to Boston, not until she had enough material for her book. The sun beat down mercilessly as she stepped back onto the wooden sidewalk, adjusting the bonnet that shielded her fair complexion. At 22, Penelope had already published articles in several Eastern newspapers, but this documenting the rapidly changing West would be her greatest achievement. "Miss, are you all right?" a deep voice inquired. Startled, Penelope turned to find herself facing a tall man whose sun-bronzed face suggested long days under open skies. His eyes, a startling blue against his weathered skin, reflected genuine concern. "I'm quite fine, thank you," she replied, instinctively tugging her bonnet lower to shield her face. In her experience, men often took one look at her and dismissed her serious aspirations. The man, clearly a cowboy from his worn leather chaps and the dust of the trail still clinging to his clothes, stepped closer. With gentle fingers, he tilted her bonnet back and said words that would change her life forever. "You're beautiful." Penelope felt heat rush to her cheeks, but she raised her chin defiantly. "Sir, I hardly think my appearance is relevant to anything." The cowboy's laugh was warm, not mocking. "I meant no offense, madam. Just speaking the truth as I see it." He touched the brim of his hat. "Owen O'Malley at your service." "Penelope Sinclair," she replied, noting the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my affairs." "Never doubted it for a second, Miss Sinclair." His grin widened. "You're new to Independence. What brings a lady like yourself to our humble town?" Penelope hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I'm writing a book about the frontier. The real frontier, not the romanticized version Eastern readers consume so eagerly." Owen's eyebrows rose. "A writer? Well, that's something indeed." He glanced at the journal she still clutched. "And what have you learned about us wild Westerners so far?" "That you're far more complex than the dime novels suggest," she admitted. A commotion further down the street drew their attention. A wagon had lost a wheel, spilling its contents across the road. Owen touched his hat again. "Duty calls, Miss Sinclair. If you need a guide to show you the real West, I work at the Double Circle Ranch, just north of town." With that, he strode off to help, leaving Penelope staring after him. That evening in her rented room above the general store, Penelope wrote in her journal. "Met a cowboy today, Owen O'Malley. Unlike the rough men who dominate these streets, there's a gentleness to him. He called me beautiful, which I should find impertinent, but instead. No, I mustn't be distracted. I came to document the West, not to lose my heart to it." 3 days later, Penelope sat in the town's only proper restaurant, reviewing her notes. She had interviewed the blacksmith, a former slave who'd built a successful business after the war, the schoolteacher, a young woman determined to bring education to frontier children, and several merchants. But she needed more. The heart of the frontier lay beyond the town's borders. "Miss Sinclair," a familiar voice called. Owen O'Malley stood at her table, hat in hand. "Fancy meeting you here, Mr. O'Malley," she acknowledged, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please join me." He sat, placing his hat on the empty chair beside him. "How's your book coming along?" "Slowly," she admitted. "I need to venture beyond Independence, see the ranches, meet the people who are truly shaping this land." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "The cattle drive to Sedalia leaves in a week. I could arrange for you to accompany us, if you're serious about seeing the real West." Penelope's heart leapt at the opportunity. That would be extraordinary. But surely the trail boss wouldn't allow a woman along? Josiah's my uncle, Owen replied with a grin. And we'll be taking the supply wagon. You could ride along, see what a drive is really like. It's hard work, Miss Sinclair, not the adventure the papers make it out to be. That's exactly what I want to document, she said eagerly. We leave at dawn next Monday, Owen said. Pack light, wear practical clothes. His eyes twinkled. And maybe leave that pretty bonnet behind. It won't survive the trail dust. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparations. Penelope wrote to her father in Boston, assuring him she was well and pursuing valuable research. She purchased sturdy trousers scandalous, but necessary to wear under her simplest skirt, and invested in a wide-brimmed hat that would protect her face without hampering her vision. When Monday arrived, Penelope was waiting at the designated meeting point before the sun breached the horizon. The cattle drive was assembling outside town, hundreds of longhorns, their massive horns gleaming in the early light, accompanied by a dozen cowboys on horseback. Owen rode up to her, leading a sturdy-looking wagon. Morning, Miss Sinclair. Ready for an adventure? More than ready, she replied, accepting his hand as he helped her onto the wagon seat. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. Don't thank me yet, he warned with a smile. 3 weeks on the trail might change your mind. As they set out, the rising sun painting the prairie gold, Penelope couldn't remember feeling more alive. The vastness of the landscape, the lowing of the cattle, the shouts of the cowboys as they kept the herd together, all of it spoke to something primal in her soul. By midday, the romance had dimmed somewhat. Dust coated her throat and clothes, the constant movement of the wagon had every muscle aching, and the sun beat down without mercy. Having second thoughts? Owen asked as he rode alongside the wagon during a brief stop to water the cattle. Penelope straightened her spine. Not at all. This is precisely what I came for, the unvarnished truth. His smile held admiration. You're made of stronger stuff than most city folk, Miss Sinclair. That evening, camped by a creek, Penelope sat apart from the men, writing furiously in her journal. The cowboys regarded her with curiosity but kept their distance, respecting the invisible boundary Owen had established around her. Owen brought her a tin plate of beans and salt pork. Not what you're used to, I reckon, but it keeps body and soul together. It's perfect, she assured him, setting aside her writing to eat. Tell me about yourself, Mr. O'Malley. What brought you to ranching? Owen settled beside her, keeping a respectful distance. My family came west when I was 12. Pa had dreams of gold in California, but we never made it past Missouri. He took work at the Double Circle, and when he passed 5 years ago, Uncle Josiah kept me on. I'm sorry about your father, Penelope said softly. Owen nodded in acknowledgement. What about your family? They must worry about you out here alone. My mother died when I was 16, she explained. Father raised me himself. He's a professor at Harvard. He wanted me to marry one of his colleagues, settle into a proper Boston life. She smiled wryly. But I've always been drawn to stories, to understanding people different from myself. And now you're here, eating trail dust with a bunch of cowboys. Owen laughed. I'd like to see the professor's face. He'd be horrified, Penelope admitted. But he loves me. He'll understand once he reads my book. As days turned into weeks, Penelope's journal filled with observations, the cowboys' songs around the campfire, the quiet camaraderie developed through shared hardship, the breathtaking beauty of sunrises on the open prairie. But increasingly, her entries contained references to Owen, his kindness to the young hands, his skill with the cattle, the stories he shared when they rode together. One evening, when a sudden storm forced them to make early camp, Penelope found herself helping Owen secure the wagon's canvas cover against the wind. You've changed, he remarked, studying her face in the fading light. Self-consciously, she touched her cheek, aware that the sun had bronzed her once pale skin. Is it that noticeable? It's not just your appearance, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the rising wind. You move differently, speak differently. Like you belong out here. The intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. Perhaps I do. The first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and cold. Quick, under the wagon, Owen directed, guiding her beneath the vehicle where the ground remained dry. Huddled together in the small space, listening to the rain drum against the canvas above, something shifted between them. Penelope was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body next to hers, the scent of leather and open air that clung to him. Penelope, he said softly, using her given name for the first time. I know you came west for your book, but I'm wondering if maybe there's room in your plans for something else. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What did you have in mind, Mr. O'Malley? Owen, he corrected gently. And I was thinking about you staying on after the drive. Independence isn't Boston, but it's growing. There's a newspaper starting up. They might value someone with your writing skills. Are you suggesting this for the sake of my career? She asked, studying his face in the dim light. His laugh was soft. Not entirely, no. His hand found hers in the shadows. I find myself wanting your company for longer than this drive will last. The rain intensified, creating a curtain around their shelter. In that moment of privacy, Penelope made a decision that would have scandalized her Boston acquaintances. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Owen's surprise lasted only a moment before he returned the kiss, one hand gently cradling her face. When they separated, both were breathless. I shouldn't have done that, Penelope whispered, though she felt no regret. I'm mighty glad you did, Owen replied, his thumb gently tracing her cheekbone. I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you hiding behind that bonnet. The storm passed, but something permanent had changed between them. During the day, they maintained propriety, but each evening brought shared conversations, subtle touches, and growing certainty that their connection was more than fleeting. 2 days before they were set to reach Sedalia, disaster struck. A ravine that should have been dry was swollen with runoff from storms upstream. As the herd began the crossing, the leaders were caught by a sudden surge of water. Panic spread through the cattle, and within moments, the orderly drive dissolved into chaos. Owen and the other cowboys worked desperately to control the stampede, while Penelope, ignoring Owen's instructions to stay with the wagon, grabbed the reins of a loose horse and joined the effort to direct cattle away from the dangerous water. Hours later, with the herd finally settled and the losses counted, 12 cattle drowned, and 1 young cowboy injured when his horse fell, Owen found Penelope tending to scratches on her arms from being caught in brush during the roundup. You could have been killed, he said, his voice tight with fear and anger. What were you thinking? That you needed help, she replied simply. I couldn't just watch. His anger deflated. No, I suppose you couldn't. That's who you are. He knelt beside her, taking the cloth from her hands to gently clean a cut she missed. You terrified me, Penny. The nickname, spoken with such tenderness, melted something inside her. I'm sorry for frightening you, but not for helping. This is the life I want to understand, Owen. I can't do that from the sidelines. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. You're not like any woman I've ever known. I hope that's a compliment, she said, attempting lightness. The highest, he assured her, pressing a kiss to her palm. But promise me you'll be more careful. I'm finding that I rather need you in one piece. The remainder of the journey passed without incident. When they reached Sedalia, Penelope experienced a moment of disorientation at returning to civilization such as it was in the small railroad town. The hotel room that had been arranged for her seemed stifling after weeks under open skies. While the cowboys celebrated the successful drive, Owen came to her room, knocking respectfully and waiting in the hallway when she opened the door. We head back tomorrow, he said without preamble. Uncle Josiah's anxious to get home before winter sets in properly. Penelope nodded, feeling strangely bereft. I should continue east, I suppose. There are publishers in St. Louis who might be interested in my book. Owen's face fell. Is that what you want? It's what I planned. she said carefully. Before us, he finished. Taking her hands in his, he continued. Come back to Independence, Penny. Finish your book there. See if what's between us is something that can last. Looking into his earnest face, Penelope knew her decision had already been made. Yes, she said simply. I'll come back with you. The return journey was easier, fewer cattle to manage, as most had been sold in Sedalia, and the weather held fair. But a tension had developed between them, an awareness that once they returned to Independence, decisions would need to be made about their future. 2 days from town, they made camp early near a stand of cottonwoods. While the others prepared the evening meal, Owen led Penelope to a small rise overlooking the campsite. I wanted a moment alone with you, he explained, spreading his coat on the ground for her to sit. Once we're back, things will get complicated. How so? She asked, though she suspected she knew. Owen sat beside her, his eyes on the horizon. People will talk. A respectable woman like yourself, keeping company with a cowboy. It won't sit well with some. Do you care what they think? Penelope challenged gently. Not for myself, he admitted. But I won't have your reputation damaged. She laughed softly. Owen, I'm a woman traveling alone, wearing trousers, and riding about cattle drives. I think my reputation is already beyond salvation in certain circles. His smile was brief. There's something else. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. This was my mother's. Pa gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for the right woman. In his palm lay a simple gold ring set with a small pearl. It's not fancy, he said apologetically, but it comes with a question. Penelope's breath caught. Owen. I know it's fast, he rushed on. We've only known each other a few weeks. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Penelope Sinclair, with your courage and your curiosity and your beautiful way of seeing the world. Tears blurred her vision. Asked me, she whispered. Owen took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. Will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner, share this life with me? Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. As Owen sealed their engagement with a kiss, Penelope felt pieces of herself clicking into place. She had come west seeking stories and found her own instead. Their return to Independence caused the expected stir of gossip, but Penelope found she cared little for the whispers. She took a room at the boarding house run by Owen's aunt, a formidable widow named Martha, who declared her approval of the match by immediately putting Penelope to work helping with the accounts. Girl with your education shouldn't let her mind go to waste, Martha pronounced. And Owen never could make his figures balance. Within weeks, Penelope had secured a position with the fledgling Independence Gazette, writing a weekly column about life in the West. Her first piece, about the cattle drive, earned her the editor's respect and a permanent role at the paper. Their wedding, held in early December as the first snows dusted the plains, was a simple affair in the town's small church. Penelope wore a new dress of deep blue wool, with a small bonnet adorned with forget-me-nots, a nod to their first meeting. Owen, standing tall in his best clothes, could scarcely take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached his side, just as he had that first day. This time, Penelope didn't hide her face. And you, Mr. O'Malley, are about to be my husband. The best decision I ever made, he replied, squeezing her hand as the minister began the ceremony. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, close enough for Penelope to walk to the Gazette offices but with enough land for Owen to keep horses. He continued working at the Double Circle, but as winter deepened, spent more time in town helping the blacksmith, for whom he had a natural aptitude. By spring, they had settled into a rhythm of life that suited them both, Owen splitting his time between ranch work and the forge, Penelope writing both for the newspaper and continuing her book. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, sharing the day's events and planning their future. I received a letter from my father today, Penelope announced one evening in late April. "He's coming to visit this summer." Owen looked up from the bridle he was mending. "Is he still upset about the wedding?" "He says he's reconciled to it," she replied with a smile. "And curious to meet the man who swept his daughter off to the frontier." "I'll be on my best behavior," Owen promised. "Though I doubt a Harvard professor will find much to approve of in me." Penelope moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. "He'll see what I see, a good man with a kind heart and strong hands." She hesitated, then added, "And the father of his grandchild." Owen's hand stilled. "Penny? Are you saying?" She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. "The doctor confirmed it today. We're going to have a baby, Owen. In November." The bridal fell forgotten as Owen gathered her into his arms, his laughter mixing with tears of happiness. "A baby," he repeated, wonderment in his voice. "Our child." Professor Sinclair's visit in July went better than either had dared hope. The distinguished academic, initially reserved, was won over by Owen's intelligence and evident devotion to his daughter. By the time he departed, he had not only given his blessing but also provided funds for Owen to expand the blacksmith shop he was now managing, following the elderly smith's retirement. "A man should have a trade he can practice in one place," the professor declared. "Especially with a family to consider." When November brought their son into the world, a healthy boy they named James Thomas O'Malley, Penelope felt her life had come full circle. As she nursed the infant in the quiet of their bedroom, Owen sat beside them, his face filled with pride and love. "He has your eyes," Owen observed, gently touching the baby's downy head. "And your chin," Penelope replied. "He'll be handsome, like his father." Owen leaned forward to kiss her forehead. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For hiding your face behind that bonnet that day," he answered with a smile. "If you hadn't, I might never have had the courage to speak to you." Penelope laughed. "And to think, I was trying to be invisible." "You could never be invisible to me, Penny," Owen said seriously. "From the first moment, you were the most beautiful, most remarkable person I'd ever seen." As their son drifted to sleep in her arms, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her here from Boston society to a small frontier town, from ambitious writer to wife and mother. Yet she had not abandoned her dreams. Her book was nearly complete, and her column in the Gazette was now widely read across the territory. "No regrets?" Owen asked, seeming to read her thoughts. Penelope shook her head. "Not one," she assured him. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." 5 years later, Independence had grown into a prosperous town, with a railroad connection that brought new settlers and opportunities. Owen's blacksmith business had expanded to include a small foundry, while Penelope's book about frontier life had been published to acclaim in Eastern literary circles. Their family had grown as well. 3-year-old Elizabeth toddled after her older brother, both children thriving in the freedom of their Western upbringing. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Owen surprised Penelope with a picnic on the prairie, just the two of them while Martha watched the children. "Do you remember what you wrote in your journal that first night on the cattle drive?" he asked as they sat together under a clear blue sky. Penelope smiled. "That I came to document the West, not to lose my heart to it?" "Exactly." Owen took her hand, the same gentle touch that had captivated her years ago. "I'd say you managed to do both, Mrs. O'Malley. The best kind of compromise," she agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "I found my story and my home in the same journey." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in gold and amber, Owen helped Penelope to her feet. "We should head back before dark," he said, though he seemed reluctant to end their time alone. Penelope reached up to touch his face, still handsome despite the new lines that work and laughter had etched there. "I love you, Owen O'Malley. Every day, more than the day before." His smile, warm and true as the day they met, was all the response she needed. Together, they packed up their picnic and turned toward home, walking hand in hand across the land that had brought them together, a cowboy and a writer who had found in each other the greatest adventure of all.